Good morning, everyone. I'm considering myself very lucky to be here right now. It's been crazy. Oh my goodness, just nonstop. So, whoops, I gotta shut off my speakers. Hold on. Oh my goodness. I hope this is not a sign of how the rest of the day is gonna go. Oh my goodness. You know what? We just grit and bear it, right? Good morning, Sue, Linda, Kathy, Melinda, Linda, Vesta, Sharon. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Yes, quite a morning. So, kind of explains why we are starting out the way that we are, because there was just not enough time to get everything prepped. Hi, Holly. Hi, Kay and Sandra, Diane, Sheila, Vicky. Again, thank you for being here. I am going to take a breather and just get myself to calm down. I was so upset about being a few minutes late. I'm kind of all keyed up, but we're going to take things slow this morning. You are going to love this quilt pattern. I've got several samples to show you, all using all the same products, but just to show you how different the block can look. And I am using online exclusives that will be available in November. Because I won't be on the rest of the month, this was my chance to show you a sneak peek of some things that I think making quilt cards you really need to put on your wish list. So let's go over a few things. First of all, the embossing folder. So this embossing folder is called Beautiful Pattern. And I hope you can get a good look at it. Let me check my angle here on the computer. Yeah, you're getting a good idea of what it looks like. What I love about this folder is that this is the debossed side right here. And I love how it looks like machine stitching. And so this is my favorite side. This is the texture that you'll get if you put your quilt block in the folder upside down, meaning that the front of the folder usually has the Stampin' Up logo at the bottom. Now here's the raised texture side. Still beautiful for quilt cards. It just depends on what your preference is. Another thing I love about this folder is when we're looking for an embossing folder that we don't want it to take away from the quilt pattern itself. I mean, sometimes you can do that. Either side is subtle enough that it's going to do wonderful things to your quilt blocks. So this embossing folder is called Beautiful Pattern. What I've started doing with my embossing folders is I'm leaving a swatch in the folder when I'm not using it, so that when I am considering folders, it's a lot easier just to take it out, flip it over and look at it and kind of determine if it's a good candidate for the quilt block that I'm doing. Okay, so I'm just leaving a swatch inside my folders so that I already know what the pattern's going to look like. I'm going to set this to the side because I'm going to need it when we do our quilting. And then let's look at the Banner Sayings bundle. You'll notice this is the new packaging. Starting in with November orders, there's no more red rubber stamps that will be coming out. They'll all be photopolymer. I love the packaging. This slides in and out really nice. I struggle with the other ones that we currently have. But this envelope here will fit your dies and your stamps. So that will eliminate some, it'll help with your storage and things like that. And with this bundle, I love this punch right here. So what I've done is I have chosen 3 sayings, and I sat them. So this is my template that I'm going to keep with the stamp set. And I positioned 3 different sayings right within these windows, and then picked them up with my acrylic block. That way, when I stamp them, I can put them into the punch, and we'll do this as we get to this step. But I can punch them all out at the same time, and I just love this bundle right here. So again, that's called Banner Sayings. And the embellishments are called Pearls of Beauty. You saw me use these last week. What I love about these embellishments is they're not real big and bumpy. So it'll help your cards lay flatter. When it comes to mailing, it won't create such big bumps. So I love those. And then this is the Brushed with Beauty Designer Series paper. These are smaller pieces. It comes in a 12 by 12. Some of the patterns may look a little familiar, like maybe we've seen them before, but in a different color. And this color palette seems kind of old-fashioned to me. And maybe, well, Stampin' Up knows. Stampin' Up knows trends years before. And I don't know how the industry, fashion and interior decorating, they all seem to know trends way ahead of time that they can plan for. But these are very muted colors, but they're really, really pretty. So that's what, these are bigger versions of some of the papers that I am using today. Hi, Tina. Hi, Judy. Let's see. I thought I saw a question, maybe not. A quilt would traditionally have the deboss stitching, right? Yes. Stitching will lay down in the quilt. What creates the loft is what goes on inside the stitching. Like, it'll help, especially, have you ever noticed that when you wash a quilt that's just been quilted, you know, the cotton shrinks a little bit, so it creates some little puckering around the stitches, which then kind of gives it like a puffed up look around the stitching. But yes, stitches usually lay down into the fabric. But sometimes you want that embossed side to really show the pattern. So what's great is we've got choices when we decide what to do with the quilting on our quilt block. So Sue, that was a really good point that you made there. Hi, Diane and Dawn. Michaeline, hello, good morning. And Judy, do you have the whole Wisconsin crew with you this morning? Hi, Julie Marie. And hi, Stephanie, Marilyn. Okay, Deborah, lots of people jumping on. So let's get started with the project. I just wanted to show you all that new product that's coming out here. Very first part of November. Let's make sure that I don't, let's see if I can zoom just a little bit tighter. And I'll try to remember to keep working at the top of my paper here so that we are in camera. Everything seems magnified this morning. I'm not sure if that is a Facebook thing or not. So yesterday, I gave you some prep instructions. At first, it was just what we were going to need for the quilt block because I was still very undecided how I was going to use it. And then a little later, I posted a second prep post with a few pieces of designer series paper and some layers, and then, you know, just make sure you have card bases and coordinating colors. It's a standard A2 card, nothing fancy, not a fun fold or anything like that. So let's bring in the pieces that I had you prepped, and I kind of did them in the order. My intent was to show you how the colors were going to play together in order, but I don't know if that'll really follow through. So we've got a 3 3/4 inch background piece. That was number 1. And then we had a number 2, which I wanted to contrast with number 1. Designer series paper number 3 was just something multicolored, so that we're pulling colors out of it to use in the block. Number 4 was the contrast with number 2. And you guys, I was probably overthinking how I could help you choose your colors. We'll see. And then number 5, I wanted it to contrast with 2, you know, so these are just little things. And I did this because I already know what the pattern's going to look like. You don't. And I thought I was helping you, but I could have very well have just been confusing you. So if you're at the point where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to watch what she does and then pick out my papers, I totally get it. I'm sorry if I confused you that far down the line. So let's work on the quilt block. We're going to do our cutting together of our pieces. And we will, you're going to love this block. Okay, so let's go with number 1. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create a 9-patch grid on your background piece. What I've already done is I have, with a pencil and a ruler, my squares are 1 1/4 inches square. So you can do this by scoring 1 1/4 inch on all 4 sides, and when you're done doing that, you'll have your 9-patch. You can do it by using your scoring tool, or this doesn't look square. We're going to find out when I do I could be off, but we'll find out because we're going to do our cutting. This just looks more rectangle-y to me. I think I'm off. I'm thinking I'm off on my sides. Again, I was trying to rush. That's 1 1/4 inch. That's a little shy. And that's 1 1/4 inch. Okay. It's amazing how just being off a smidge will make that square look like a rectangle, but we're going to be good. So right now, put a grid on your background piece. Okay? I'll give you a second to do that. I'm going to get that out of the way, and I'm going to bring in my trimmer, because now what we're going to do is we are going to look at our other pieces, and we need to do some cutting. So get out your 1 1/4 by 6 1/4 strip of designer series paper, number 2. Okay. And I am going to cut 5 1 1/4 inch squares from this strip. So there's 1, 2, 3, and this should be 1.25 inches on both sides, because I'm using both sides of my trimmer here to make sure that I've got squares. So this last piece is 1.25 inches on both sides. Okay, so there's 5 of number 2. So we're going to set those to the side. And then let's come to number 3, which is a 1.25 by 3.5. And the first cut I want to make is a 7/8 inch piece. I need a 7/8 of an inch square. So I'm going to take a look at this though, because I want to figure out which end I want to work from. I think I'll leave it as is with me knowing the pattern already. My background is that petal pink, so I want some colors that aren't going to blend in too much. So I think I'm going to go with this end here. I'm going to cut off a piece that's 7/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to turn it because I need it to be square. And I'll cut off this other lighter end here. This is scrap. So here's our 7/8 inch square. Now I need 4 5/8 of an inch squares. So I'm going to line this up on 5/8 of an inch, and I'm working on the right side of my trimmer. So I've got it lined up at 5/8 of an inch. Actually, they're both 5/8 of an inch, which is great because now I could actually cut more squares so that I have more options when it comes to laying these squares in. So I'm gonna cut them all. I'm just gonna cut a bunch of 5/8 of an inch square, because this is going to give me more options. And if I have to throw a couple away, I am not worried about that. And this is going to have a little extra. These are just small pieces of paper, so I'm not going to get too hung up on if I have to throw, 2 or 3 5/8 of an inch squares away. Or if you like to save them, throw them in a little dish, and maybe you will use them in a future card somewhere. I do not save pieces this tiny, and I'm not even going to use that one, so I'm just going to stop. So here I have some squares to play with. We're going to set those aside. And now let's look at number 4. This is just a 1.25 inch square, but we need to make 8 triangles out of it. Okay, so I'm going to put this in my trimmer on point, and I've got my 2 points in my cutting track. Okay, let's bring that down just a little bit. And I'm going to cut it in half diagonally. Okay. And now I'm going to turn my triangle. The longest side is across the top of the trimmer. And I'm going to cut this triangle in half. And now I need to cut these 2 triangles in half again. And then I'm going to repeat this with the other large triangle that is left from our very first cut. This is going to give us our 8 triangles that we need. one more. Okay, so let's get those out of the way. Number 5. Where's my number 5? This one stays square. Easy peasy, right? Don't have to do anything with that one. The last piece is a 7/8 by 1 3/4. And what we want to do is we want to turn this so that the 1 3/4 is along the top. And we're going to cut this in half at 7/8 of an inch. Okay? So if you double 7/8, you're going to get 1 3/4. Okay? And those are those two pieces. I probably have you quite lost, right? I don't think you can figure out the mystery just yet. Okay, so now let's see where I'm at here. Hi, Jill. Hi, Ruby. Julia, Stephanie. Welcome everybody who's jumped in. Hi, Janice. Hi, Ellen. So at this point, we're just doing our cutting. Now, let's bring in that base piece that's 3 3/4. Take DSP number 2. You've got 5 squares, right? 4 of them are going to get placed on our background here, and we're going to create a 9 patch. So where do these 4 go? Well, the top one, the top row, that square is going to go in the center. On the second row, the far left and the farthest right, left, and the bottom one is in the center. So now you have a basic 9 patch quilt block. Okay, and that's where we're starting. Hi, Diane. Hi, Debbie. Hey, Vicky. Okay, keep this one over to the side. Okay, we'll get to that fella right there in a little bit. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and instead of picking these pieces up and risking dropping them like I have known to do, I'm just going to put my liquid glue right inside my squares and then pick up my square, lay it down. You want to make sure that you're going all the way out to the edge. And you just want to make sure that you're square. And if your glue grabs before you can move it around, you're kind of stuck with what you got. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to work on this left square. Push it in just a little bit. We'll work on this right one. And let's see, make sure I'm out to the edge. Can come in a little bit. Whoops. Back it back out, Julie. Okay, and then this one down at the bottom. I'll tell you, I don't know where I'd be without a fine tip glue applicator bottle. I have not used my green glue like this ever since I got this. I put my Tombow in my fine tip applicator because we work with such fine pieces. And with the Tombow, that bottle just comes out too much glue than what I need. So here we've got our 9 patch, okay? And we're going to set this aside and bring in those 2 7/8 inch squares of DSP number 6. Bring in that leftover square from number 2 and bring in that square of number 5. Okay. What I want to do is I want to put these squares in the center of these larger squares on point, but I need to make sure that they're straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my square on my grid paper. I'm going to take a pencil, and 5/8 of an inch is halfway. So that's my center. I'm just going to eyeball this 3rd square right here on my grid paper, and I'm going to make a tick mark on my Designer Series paper. I'm going to come around the corner on the right, come down to the 3rd square, eyeball what looks to be halfway. Then I'm going to continue going clockwise around my square, find the 3rd one, make a tick mark, and then come up on the left-hand side and make a tick mark. Now what's great about me using my paper right here is when I go to set this one down, my tick marks are already there, and I can just mark on my Designer Series paper. Now when I go to line up that smaller square, I'll know where my points are, because it's kind of important that those are evenly done. Okay, so let's put some glue on the back of the 7/8 inch square, and I'm going to find my little tick marks here. And that should be pretty close. So there's that one. And where are they on this one? Okay, I see them now. I think I see them. There we go. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. What we are going to do by doing this step right here, putting that smaller square inside the larger, is I am taking a shortcut. And you'll see that instead of cutting a whole bunch of teeny tiny pieces, I'm going to start large, cut them down, and then my hands aren't trying to hold such small pieces and glue them down. So I'm going to move all of this stuff out of my way. I want you to bring in your trimmer again. Okay. Now I want you to work, it's important because we're going to cut these squares 2 different ways. They're not identical. So take the square that is the same color as the 4 squares you put on your background piece, okay? Bring in your trimmer, and what we're going to do is we're going to place it up here at the top, and we want to cut it in half at 5/8. So I've got it lined up with 5/8, and I'm 5/8 on this side too, and my points are falling in my track. Okay, let me bring this down. I rocked it a little bit. So I'm gonna, when I lower my guard here, my cutting blade is like hovering over the center of my block. And then when I push that down in, I can go up and down, and I have cut it in half. As quilters, now look what we've got. People have asked me about what is a flying geese. They see the long triangle, the wide triangle, and this is actually a flying geese unit right here, where you've got your rectangle. In sewing, one of the ways that you can learn how to make a flying geese unit is you've got your rectangle, and then you put 2 squares of fabric, and you'll lay one on top. You'll sew diagonally from like this corner to the center. You'll flip that fabric back, press it, cut off the excess underneath, and then you've got this like half square triangle right here, and you would repeat it on the other side. So just a little to, you know, throw in some quilting in there, and this is what your flying geese unit would look like. But now what we need to do is we need to cut this in half again, because I need 4 5/8 inch squares. Also, by doing this method right here, is if you had cut a bunch of little squares diagonally to have half square triangles, and then you're trying to line them up on your piece that you're working on, sometimes if your cutting isn't straight or it's a little bit off, sometimes it's hard to match up those 2 triangles to create this square right here. Well, we're kind of taking that out of the equation by adhering the one color on top of the other. So now here I have these 5/8 inch squares, and I didn't have to match up 2 tiny little triangles, okay? That was done with the cutting. So I'm going to set those out of the way. Now bring in your other square that you put together, and we're going to turn this on point, okay? So turn it on point, and we're going to cut this in half diagonally. And then we're going to turn each of these triangles around. We're going to put it back into the trimmer with our point in the cutting track. And we're going to cut it again so that we have these triangle units right here that already have the square up there tucked into the peak. Okay? And let's turn this around and do the same thing. So now we just did these units that we're going to put back into our quilt block. Okay? And right now you are still like, what is this? What is this block gonna look like? Hi, Sandy. How are ya? Hi, Lori. Okay, so let's get these units out of the way, because now we can go back to our quilt block and we can continue making our pattern, our mystery block. Bring in those squares that we just cut, and you'll notice that the one side of the triangle is the same color as the 4 that you did. What we want to do is the side that is not the same color. So here it's going to be our darling duckling. These squares are going to fit right in the corners of the 9 patch that we just did. Okay, so that is the next step, is filling in, and now we're creating a pattern. We're getting it started, right? So now you can go ahead and glue those in. I have a PDF started, and then I went and changed the steps, because I found that this work, the way I'm showing you right now, was easier than how I had originally done it. So I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to redo the PDF. But I'm hoping that you'll have that PDF tonight. It might be a little late tonight, but I want to redo it because I think this is the easier way to follow. And it's this step right here that was the reason why I wanted to change it. In the way I've got it set up right now, we wouldn't be doing this step right now. We'd be doing another one. And I just felt that these pieces tucked in a lot easier if I put them in first. Okay, so hopefully you're all still following along with me and you haven't given up yet. Now what we're going to do is, remember that square that we cut into the 8 triangles? Well, now what we're going to do is around the inside of each of these green squares, we're going to start layering our triangles. Working with designer series paper, yes, we are creating layers, but when we go to quilt it and the pressure of the rollers like flattens everything out, our ridges become really nice and smooth, and it just all blends together, and you won't notice the layers as much. So we're going to take a triangle. We're going to put some glue on the back. And the 90-degree angle of each of these triangles is going to sit down in our corners here. And I'm going to put it right up next to the triangle that I created when we set these squares in. So this is going to sit down in this corner and line it up as closely as you can with the triangle that's right there. Okay, and we're just going to keep working around. This one, my 90-degree is down in the corner. And I want to line it up as closely as possible. I've created a valley right here. Now this is going to be, you're going to start like thinking of patterns right about this point. You're going to be like, oh, I know what the next, what this is going to look like when we're done with this step. So I'm just going to turn my block a quarter of a turn, and I'm going to keep working right in the middle here. And we're just going to keep turning our block until we've got it all filled in. Right here. Okay, I'm going to turn it. So tell me, what do you see happening here to the center of our quilt block? It is the one pattern I think that is universal, that when people see it, it's to them, well, it is to me. It just defines what a quilt pattern is for me. I think it's the most recognizable pattern, people see it and they think of a quilt right away. Any guessers? I don't see any guesses, and I know that you can see what's happening here. Someone is waiting with a bated breath. That's funny. Push it down just a little bit. And one more triangle. Okay, I am surprised nobody's saying anything. That's okay. It could be that you're all busy working along and you don't have time to make a comment. So here our pattern on the inside is a sawtooth star. Okay, so we started out with a 9 patch, now adding some triangles. We've worked in a sawtooth. This right here could be the X block. You're going to see so many quilt patterns within this one overall pattern that I don't even know, like, what would you name it, right? Because you can go in so many directions with it. But we all started with a 9 patch. So we've got our sawtooth star going right there. Now what I want you to do is bring in these other units, these triangle units that we made here. And these are going to set, we're still working on our green squares here. But the longest side of your triangle is going to fit right along the outside edge of your quilt block. So I'm going to start here, and then we're just going to be turning our block. And these triangle units are going to set to the outside. Okay, I'm going to turn it. This way, for those of you who are new and watching for the first time, I try to use muscle memory in my piecing so that whenever I can, I don't have to really keep guessing, like, now which way does this go? Because I'm going to the same place each time. Turn it. Going to go all the way to the outside edge, and my corners are going to the top and bottom. Turn it one more time, and we'll put our last triangle unit. So now, what do you see? Because there's a couple of different things that are happening here when we place these units in. One of them being probably the most noticeable right away is the chevron, right? So you've got your chevron that has popped out. But if you look, if you follow the darling duckling pieces, it looks like there's a square on point underneath the layers. So here we've got like a square and a square. There are so many quilt patterns that are happening within this one block that it's just crazy. And it's like you could stop at any point. If you like what you just did, then you can stop. You don't have to go further. Okay? But we're going to go further because we still got pieces left over. Okay. So bring in you've got this 7/8 inch square, and remember all those little 5/8 inch squares that we did, and we cut more than what we needed so that we have choices. Now, the biggest square, the 7/8 inch, that should fit right down into the center of that middle square, and your points should touch practically perfect before you glue it down. Always check whatever your B side looks like. Maybe you like the B side better than you liked the one you did before. You just want to, before you put glue on the back of anything, you want to just flip things over and look. I'm going to keep with my original plan here, although I do like the stripe. I actually, the very first card that I made when I was figuring this out, I used the stripe as the background because I didn't have to worry about how I was to cut any squares so that the lines would like go back together. I used the stripe or a directional pattern as my background because I didn't have to make anything match up at that point. The lines are where the lines are. Okay? So I would say that that would be a hint that if you want to use directional designer series paper, a directional pattern, make that your background so that you are not trying to match up any of those lines further along in the process. Okay? Now, so we've got the center, and I'm looking for contrast against my background. So I'm going to take the 4 squares that have the darkest, we've got Calypso Coral in here going down into a red. I'm going to use these 4 squares, and these are going to go in the corners of my block. Okay. And this color looks really well against the petal pink. Make sure you're just all the way out to the edge. And if your squares aren't perfect, like points aren't matching perfectly, but it's only a smidge, don't worry about it. When you quilt your block, again, let the machine just smooth out all the ridges and just melt all of your seam lines together. Now, in real quilting, piecing for quilts, I don't give myself much grace when it comes to points. That is a challenge I love to give myself. And, I don't care how many times I have to rip it out. Hopefully I haven't had to rip out so many times that I'm damaging my fabric. But it is a challenge that I love. I look forward to it when it comes to sewing. I want to see how perfect I can get those points to match up. Like I said, I don't give myself much grace. Okay, so that's in the corner. So there is our quilt block. This is our mystery quilt block. It looks very complicated, but when you can do some of the piecing on a larger volume and then cut it down, it's so much easier, and it goes together really quickly. For instance, if we were to cut each of these triangles individually and then set another tiny square in the valley, you're really going to have to pay attention to precision, and you don't have as much leeway. But by layering that square in the center on point to the larger square and then cutting it diagonally in both directions, we got our units already done for us. It was just a matter of adhering them on top of that darker square. Okay, so when you're looking at a quilt pattern, just take a moment, look at it, think about what you could do differently to cut down on how many small pieces you have. Had we done each of these triangles individually, you're hoping that you had a pretty straight cut diagonally to make sure that these two butted right up to each other and there was no gap in between. So those little subunits really did come into play and made this block go together a lot easier. Okay, now what we're going to do is I am going to place this in that embossing folder, and emboss side would be the Stampin' Up logo is looking at you. That's embossing. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to turn my quilt block over because I actually am looking for the stitching to lay down into my block. So now when I turn this over, here's the great part of it, and I don't know if this is going to show up. I hope it does. Can you see how you can see the diagonal lines? You can practically line these patterns up. It's not perfect, okay? But you can reposition this like this very center. I can get an X right there. My diamonds on the side are pretty close. And, okay, can you see how there's a little square here? It's off a little bit, but there's a square here. And this pattern really lends to the quilt block really nice. So wait till I show you. Hold on. I'm going to step away and I'm going to quilt it. You definitely want this embossing folder in your collection of embossing folders that really lend to a quilt card or stitching. You're going to want this, okay? So let's take it out. And let's see if I can get it to show up on camera. It's very subtle, you guys. It is a very subtle pattern. I'm hoping that maybe that's going to show up for you if I tilt it a little bit, but you can see the stitching. You can see the X right here. You can see that it almost creates a chevron within the chevron. It is just so cool. So you have to have this embossing folder. Okay, so, and another thing that whole process did, when I run my fingers across the top of my quilt block, yes, I do feel that I have layers, but I don't have the rough ridges that I did before I ran it through. It really smoothed it out. It just kind of melded in the seams. Okay, so if you don't currently have a machine and you're wondering like, well, does it really make a difference? It does make a difference. So be considering getting yourself a machine, which kind of, gosh, this is a segue into if you want to get a starter kit, you could put the cut and emboss machine in your starter kit and save a lot of money on it because it's way over $100, the big machine, and you could save a lot of money by just getting the starter kit, and you don't have to do another thing. Just save yourself some money. Okay, let's bring in the other pieces to finish this card. So I have a 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of cardstock, and this is going to be a layer. Okay, I'm going to use this as a layer. This one here, the basic white, that's the inside of my card. And I've actually got a piece of designer series paper here that I'm going to use as an accent strip. So I'm going to bring those flowers out in the paper on the inside of my card. So this is just going to get glued to one side, just to add some pretty paper to the inside of my card. Make sure that I'm all the way out to the edge. Okay, that just makes it look really pretty on the inside. So I'm going to set that aside. And here is a 1 1/4 inch by 6. I'm going to wrap this piece. You could put it, lay it down, glue it, and cut the excess off. But I'm really not going to have a use for these small pieces. So I'm just going to wrap them to the back. So I want to make sure that I don't go too wide here. I just need to get this down at the bottom. It doesn't even have to be even Steven. I'm just going to put this to the bottom. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to fold these tabs in. Make sure that they're flush with the bottom. I'm going to give each one a crease. And then I am just going to glue them to the back so that I have that pretty wrap around edge. Like I said, these are pieces to me that I probably wouldn't use if I cut them off anyway. So why not just wrap them around to the back? And then you've got this really pretty edge. I love paper that wraps around to the back. I think the edges are so nice and clean. So when I do it, when I make myself remember to do it. Okay, and now this, so now here, this kind of looks like the Polaroid layout, right? My quilt block is going to go right inside. I'm creating a nice border all the way around. Now, take a look before you glue it down if there's any trimming that you want to do. I'm off a little bit here. I'm not going to worry about that, okay? And so I'm just going to glue this to the top part of that layer. And I don't have a preference on where a certain paper is in there. But if you you wanted a certain piece of designer series paper going a certain way, or make sure that it's the way you want it before you glue it down. And because the embossed side of the embossing folder is on the back, and it's created all those like bumps and things, I just want to keep making sure that I'm nice and flat along the outside, that I don't have any buckling. Okay, so there's our layer. Okay, I'm going to set this to the side, and I want to bring in, because I want to play with this punch with you guys. So remember I said that I had, what I did was I took the template. Where's my template? And what I did was, well, that's not a very good color to show you on either. Let me bring in a different color background here. So what I did is I just put my stamps within, so this template is punched out of a piece of cardstock, right? And then I would lay in which word stamps I wanted. And then I just picked them all up with the same block. Okay, so now they're going to be lined up when I go to punch. So let's ink up our stamp. And I knew that I wanted some of my sentiments like going to the right or the left of those banners. So that's why they're positioned the way that they are. Okay, let's close this because Early Espresso, Cherry Cobbler, Night of Navy, all of those colors do not like me if the ink pad is left open. Okay, I'm going to close my glue for just a second because I don't want it to dry on me. Okay. Then when I bring in the punch, I can line this up. Let's see, where do I want this? I think I want it to come, nope. I'm going to use You Are Loved as my, and I can see that I was a little shaky and either I didn't line them up perfectly straight, but that's not bad. Can you see how they're lined up here? And I'm holding it down so that it secures the paper. And then I am going to punch. And now I've got 3 greetings here that I can use on my cards. You've got to get this bundle. You got to get the bundle. Let's get this piece of cardstock out of the way. And, but you know what? I'm going to bring that Darling Duckling back in because when I show you the other cards that I did, and how the patterns fell when I switched paper around, I don't have a card base that's Darling Duckling yet. And I feel that I can get away with it with this one so that it brings out more of that yellow. But I need to score this at 4 1/4 for my base. And then that Polaroid layout will get put right on top. And our insert can go on the inside. Okay, let's put that in real quick. And then I'm keeping the embellishing really simple. I am just going to pop up my sentiments on the outside and add some of those pearls that are just like gorgeous. And that's it. I did use some twine and put a couple of bows on some of my samples for you, but I really just let the quilt block get all the glory and kept the sentiment and the embellishments very simple. It's a big block and I didn't want to overpower it with a whole lot of embellishing. So I kept it simple. The quilt block is the star of the show, not my embellishing. Okay. So there is that. And then let's use, which one didn't I use in my samples? Where are my samples? Ah, right here. What didn't I use yet? I think I did use all 3. Let's use You're the Sweetest. Okay. And I'm just going to put some dimensionals on the back. I'm going to add 1 pearl, maybe 2, 3. And I'm going to call it done. And I'm going to set this kind of over this way. like that. Bring in my pearls, and the Calypso Coral is my favorite. If you need a color that you don't have, you could take your blends and you could color these white ones so that you can tailor it to the colors that are in the card that you're making. Keep that in mind. Had this not been the crumb cake, I would have thought maybe of using the crumb cake ones. But I am really, really liking the Calypso Coral. This is that red orange that is like perfect for fall. So I'm just going to put that there. And then, do I want to put maybe a couple over here? I don't know. Let's just play. Let's just play. We'll put a couple over there and then call it done. Keeping it very simple so that the quilt block is what they notice the most. And I hope you like it. I hope I've showed you some product that if you're a demonstrator, you might have already ordered it, because demonstrators get to order new things like a month ahead of time. So maybe you're looking at it. Maybe you haven't put in that order that gets free shipping. So, keep all of that in mind. And I want to show you this card here is this one right here. Same papers, the same layout. Notice that my bottom is a little different. These stripes, these two patterns right here make really fun borders for a quilt block, okay? And here I did make a bow with the old olive baker's twine and put a little bow there, so you could still do that. In fact, I've got a linen thread bow already made, and maybe I'd want to add it. I'm not sure. And this blends way too much with the crumb cake that's underneath here. So maybe I would want to make a bow with maybe the early espresso baker's or linen thread. I don't know. I'm going to put this back on my wax paper here and just think about it. I'm not sold yet. And then notice how different the quilt block looks on a card base that is of a different color. Okay, so that's the same exact layout, okay, using the exact same papers. Now here is one that I moved some colors around, and it just looks a little different with the more solid colors. Okay, and then okay, here's a different one. So that one's different. And this one is a little different. If you really want your chevrons to pop, then go with a darker color that really has a lot of contrast. The next examples I'm going to show you is I lost the chevron. They're still beautiful quilt blocks, but you'll get an idea how why color placement and contrast is important. So this one's a little different. Here I lost my star. I lost my star because the patterns blend in too much. I still think it's a beautiful block. I may have lost the Sawtooth star, but I can definitely see that I've got this square that looks like it's sitting behind the chevrons. I've got my square and a square. So, it's one of those, what pattern is going to stick out or jump out at you when you're looking at this quilt block? So, You win some, you lose some. Now let's move this over. Now these 3 cards are not finished because I just wanted to play, and they're not done. But look at this block here. My chevron is a bit lost. The chevron isn't what is jumping out at me right away. The X block is jumping out at me right away. So, you know, out of all of these different quilt patterns that's going on within this one block, where your colors are placed is what pattern you're going to see emerge. Okay? So here the X block popped out. This one here, I don't know what's what stands out on this one. I felt like I was getting the chevron, but, and I can definitely see my sawtooth star, but again, I still think it's beautiful, but things got lost in translation somewhere along the way. On the computer, I can definitely see my X block. I can definitely see my sawtooth star. The rest of it, I've got to search for a pattern. Okay? And then this last one is kind of the same way. I thought, oh, I want a darling duckling chevron. It got lost. I think it got lost because of the print that is in the paper. The whatever this is here, the branches and stuff took away from just the color. If this was more solid, I think you would see the chevrons really nicely. But you know what? What I want you to do is not overthink it and use whatever you pulled out, because you may be really surprised at what happened, or you're going to make a note on what you would do differently. Okay, so looking on the computer, what jumps out at me on this one is that I can see this square in a square. That is, to me, vivid when I look at the laptop. That's the pattern that jumps out on to me. Square in a square here, square in a square here. But it's just a really good lesson on color placement, patterns, things like that. So, I hope that you enjoyed the process today. We went a little long, but I wanted to take it slow so that you could see the patterns emerging. And we'll get back to the original card right here. Its litter mate, so to speak, is this one on Pool Party, which is a shade that came out of the Lost Lagoon colors. And you can just see how different colors give you a whole different feel, and patterns. Stripes are really great to add as a border. So thank you. Let's keyword. Oh boy, keyword. Chevron. Let's use chevron as the keyword, and then I'll give away some of the cards. I still have pieces left, so I'm going to create some more. I think I'm going to have like 8 or 10 cards, and I only need so many for myself in my stash. So, have a very blessed day. Thank you for sticking with me through the 45 minutes it took to get, hour and 15 minutes that it took to get through this. Again, though, I wanted to go slow so that you could see so many things happening within this quilt block. This would be really great if you wanted to use monochromatic colors. I think this would do well if you were using patriotic colors. I know a lot of you do cards for veterans. So think of this in a red, white, and blue palette. Maybe play with a monochromatic so that you get a sense of where darks and lights do the most for your quilt block. And please share them over in the group Quilt Cards and More. You can definitely share them under in the comments on the Chirpy page once this video posts, and you can share there also. So I can't wait to see what you do and what your papers that you used created for you. Thank you, Tina. I'm glad it was worth the wait. Everybody have a blessed day, and I will be talking with you soon.